will allow Russia to press along the front line. Ukraine simply cannot wait. It needs air defenses, ammunition and aid now. Against all odds, the Ukrainians have already achieved so much. They can prevail, but they need our support. NATO is actively working to ensure reliable and predictable security assistance to Ukraine now and for the long haul, so that Ukraine relies less on voluntary contributions and more on NATO commitments, less on short-term offers and more on multi-year pledges. Moscow needs to understand that they cannot wait us out, and therefore a package for Ukraine with predictable, robust support is what we are working on now in NATO. And I thank you, President, for Finland's strong support to step up the NATO support to Ukraine. Let me also thank Finland and you for the fact that since the full-fledged invasion of Ukraine back in 2022, Finland has been a staunch supporter of Ukraine. You have provided around 2 billion euros in military aid since 2022, including 30 million euros through the Czech-led artillery initiative. I also welcome that just last week Finland signed a new 10-year security agreement with Kiev. So we are grateful for your contributions to NATO's collective defense, to our shared security, but not least that Finland is a lead nation in providing support to Ukraine. So once again, Alex, welcome. It's great to see you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Jens, and thank you for your kind words. I remember actually watching on TV the 4th of April last year. I think it was a cold, sunny spring day when my predecessor was here with you and the national anthem was played and our flag was hoisted among the then 31 allies. And I was wondering when it's going to be the first time that I'm going to visit the headquarters, and this is it. And I must say that I felt quite at home right away. The welcome has been warm. Just a few points before we open it to questions. The first one is to say that in our conversation with the Secretary General, I stressed the fact, obviously, that the alliance has now doubled its border with Russia. And if and when the alliance defines its number one security threat as being Russia, we in Finland fully realize our responsibility for the alliance. My aim as president and our aim as Finland is to be a loyal, constructive and responsible partner in NATO. We might be in the northeastern corner geographically, but we want to be in the institutional core of NATO. That was our philosophy with the European Union, and that is our philosophy with NATO as well. With perhaps the possibility of sounding a little bit unfinished, I think in many ways in the alliance we fall somewhere in the range of a mid-sized country because of our geographic location and because of the size of our military. Because as you mentioned, when we didn't join NATO in the early 1990s, a decision was taken that we would continue our obligatory conscription. As a consequence, we have 900,000 men and women who've undergone military training, and we have 280,000 men and women that can be mobilized at wartime. At the same time, we are one of the few countries in the alliance that has long-range missiles in the land, air, and sea. We also have the second largest artillery in Europe, actually together with Poland. So my message to all of our allies here today is that you can trust us. We support the work that the Secretary General is doing as we move towards the Washington summit. We will have two very clear goals there. One is on defense and deterrence, and the other one is on supporting Ukraine. So we look forward to these coming months as we start moving towards Washington, and I look forward to seeing you, Jens, many more times before, unfortunately, at some stage you might leave us.
Thank you very much. We'll take the first question from MTV, Janne Pumelainen.
Perfect pronunciation. They were practicing it in the elevator.
Thank you, and especially for the pronunciation. Finland has not imposed any restrictions on its military aid to Ukraine, but some NATO countries still do not allow their weapons to be used to strike Russian territory. Does this undermine Ukraine's ability to win the war? And secondly, if I may, EU's Josep Borrell yesterday said that Europe must prepare for a potential war as a full-scale conflict on the continent is no longer a fantasy. How important is Finland's role while Europe prepares against the Russian threat? Thank you.
Yeah, I can start and just say that first, we can never take peace for granted. And we live in a more dangerous world. We have a full-fledged war in Europe, we have a new war in the Middle East, and we have more great power rivalry. At the same time, we have seen that NATO has adapted. So yes, we live in a more dangerous world, but NATO has become stronger to preserve peace, to prevent war, as NATO has successfully done for 75 years. And we don't see any imminent threat, a military threat against any NATO ally, because NATO's deterrence works. We are there together. An attack on one will be an attack on all, and that's the best way to prevent any armed attack on a NATO ally. Then on the support, well, it is a decision by each and every ally exactly what kind of support they provide to Ukraine. But I welcome that allies have provided also long-range systems, missiles. Allies are also now providing F-16s. And we need to remember what this is. This is a war aggression that where Russia has invaded another country, blatantly violating international law. And Ukraine has the right, according to international law, for self-defense. That's actually right enshrined in the UN Charter. And we have the right to help Ukraine uphold the right of self-defense without making NATO and NATO allies party to the conflict. And Ukraine has part of self-defense is also that Ukraine has the right to strike legitimate military targets outside Ukraine to defend themselves. So this is a war aggression. Ukraine has the right to self-defense, and I welcome that allies are providing military support to Ukraine to enable their self-defense.
Well, I guess there's a short answer and a long answer to both of your questions. The short answer about war is to say that a pessimist always prepares for the worst, but an optimist makes sure that it doesn't happen. And I think that is exactly what we should do. First, in terms of national defense, secondly, in terms of NATO's defense, and thirdly, in terms of the capacity of the European Union. As far as Finnish support, long answer, for Ukraine is concerned, it is steadfast. It will continue for as long as it takes. And from my visit to Kyiv last week on Wednesday, I think the message was very clear to all of our allies, including the United States, is that Ukraine needs ammunition, it needs weapons, and it needs vehicles, and it needs them now. So there's a short-term need of help, and that's why I have also called upon the US Congress to release the $60 billion, because that is part of the package. Will that solve all? No. We need to continue to do our part in Europe as well, and that's why I welcome the Czech initiative of pooling ammunition. I had conversations yesterday with the Prime Minister of Belgium, Alexander De Croo, who's committed 200 million euros to that particular initiative. And I actually also had lunch yesterday with Josep Borrell and discussed this particular event. I think what he tries to do is to raise the prospect of a possibility of a war, but we must make sure that that will not happen on our soil. And the best way to do it is by supporting Ukraine now.
Thank you. We'll next go to Max Delaney, AFP.
Hello, thank you very much. Secretary General, you said that Ukraine simply cannot wait any longer for air defenses. So my question is, why is Ukraine still waiting? Are the Allies unwilling or unable to provide it? And when will Ukraine get the Patriots that it's been pleading for so desperately? Thank you.
Well, NATO allies have provided unprecedented level of support to Ukraine, including air defenses, including Patriot batteries, and also other advanced systems, including the NASAMS, the IRIS-T, and other SAM-T and other advanced air defense systems. As important as delivering new systems is to ensure that the systems which are already there are working as they should, meaning they need spare parts, they need ammunition, they need maintenance. But at the foreign ministerial meeting last week, my message was the same as we also heard from many allies, and of course for Ukraine, that there is a need to step up even more and provide not only ammunition and spare parts to the existing batteries and systems, but also to deliver more systems. I know that some allies are now really looking into what more they can do, how they can dig even deeper into their inventories to provide more air defense for Ukraine, because it is urgent.
Just, if I may also, just for the record, when I was in Kyiv, we released our 23rd aid package, which brought, as the Secretary General said, our military aid to roughly 2 billion. That combined with humanitarian development, another 900 million, puts our bill up to 2.9 at this stage. Usually we, how would I put it, say less and do more, but this time around we also released 2 forms of equipment or ammunition, military material that we gave Ukraine. One was actually air defense, and the other one was heavy ammunition. Finland is actually the 6th GDP per capita measured in terms of supporting Ukraine, and we will continue to do that. I think all of us realize, not only the frontline states, but all of us in Europe realize that it is in our interest to continue to do so.
Thank you. Hanele Muilu. Sorry.
Thank you. Finnish newspaper Iltalehti told yesterday that there will be a land component command in Mikkeli under Norfolk JFC. What are the gains for NATO and what are the gains for Finland to have this unit?
Well, I'd kind of like to separate it into 2 things. The first one is to say that there's a political ambition to be under one command or another, and then that political ambition is somehow followed with a decision. No decisions have been taken yet. So we're waiting for SECUR to determine what is in the military and defense interests of the alliance, of where Finland and potentially the other Nordic countries would belong, whether it's Norfolk or Brunsum. And then after that, there should be a military decision determining what is the best place for air defense, what is the best place for sea defense, and what is the best place for land defense. So I would like not to put the carriage in front of the horse here yet. We're working with our allies for the best solution, which has got very little to do with regional policy, very little to do with politics, but it is purely a military decision. But I don't think you have to have a doctorate in military strategy to understand that if the land border of the alliance has doubled with Russia, it might be quite useful to perhaps have a land component close to that border as well.
Let me just add that we welcome the fact that Finland has offered to host a land component command for a multi-core force. But as Alex just said, as the President just said, no decision has been made yet. We are now waiting for the advice from our Supreme Allied Commander, SECUR, and based on that we'll then take a decision within some weeks or a couple of months. On the different ways we are now going to adapt our command structure. This is partly about the fact that we have Finland and Sweden as new members, but also the fact that we have actually initiated a bigger process of adapting NATO's command structure, and part of that will be also then to have different component commands in different parts of Europe, including in the Nordic area.
Thank you. And a final question to Reuters, Andrew Gray.
Thank you. There have been reports in recent days that Ukrainian military intelligence carried out an attack on a Russian warship docked off Kaliningrad. Does either of you have any information that would shed light on that report and could confirm whether it's true? And following up, would you consider it to be legitimate for Ukraine to carry out attacks on Russian warships in the Baltic, particularly given that the Baltic is now often described as a NATO lake?
So first of all, I will not go into specifics when it comes to intelligence. And second, I will not give specific advice to what kind of targets that Ukraine should or should not attack, except for saying that it is part of the right for self-defense also to hit legitimate military targets outside your own country, because Russia is using so many different types of capabilities to attack Ukraine, and Ukraine has the right for self-defense, and that includes also legitimate military targets outside Ukraine.
Thank you. This concludes.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.